I'm Noah, 52, and I've always been the quiet guy in the family. The one who works hard, keeps his head down, and doesn't stir the pot. I run a small but successful construction company. And yes, I'm built like the work I do: broad shoulders, big hands, a back that still carries years of hauling lumber and swinging hammers. People like to joke I look like a linebacker who wandered onto the wrong job site. I take it as a compliment. My daughter, Emily, is 27. She's my only kid, my pride and joy, and I'll admit I've spoiled her more than I probably should have. I paid for her college, bought her first car, and even put a down payment on the house she now shares with her fiancé, Matt. We've always been close: Sunday dinners, random phone calls just to chat, her stopping by the office to borrow tools she never returned. I thought we had the kind of bond where she could tell me anything, which is why what happened 2 months ago felt like a punch to the gut. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was at the shop, sorting invoices, when my phone lit up with Emily's name. I put it on speaker, my hands were full, and answered like I always do: "Hey, kiddo." She didn't hear me at first. There was chatter on her end, muffled voices, and then clear as day, I heard another woman's voice, sharp, almost sneering, say, "Hope he's not coming to the wedding. No room for a man built like a truck sitting next to our family." Emily laughed. Not awkwardly, not in a "please don't say that" way. She actually laughed and said, "Your wish is my command." I froze. There was a pause on my end, and for a second I thought maybe I'd misheard. But then the other voice, her future mother-in-law, I recognized it, added something about how embarrassing it would be for the photos. Emily just chuckled again and said, "Don't worry, he won't be there." I don't remember much of what they said after that. I stood in my office, staring at the half-painted drywall I'd been meaning to finish for weeks, feeling like someone had taken a 2x4 to my chest. I didn't say a word. Not then. Not for the rest of the call. She eventually realized she'd pocket-dialed me, mumbled a quick hello, and when I answered with a neutral, "Yeah, I'm here," she acted like everything was normal. Told me about cake tastings and seating charts, like I hadn't just heard her laugh at the thought of me being excluded. I hung up, sat down at my desk, and just stared at my calloused hands for a long time. I've dealt with insults before, from clients, competitors, even strangers, but hearing it from my own daughter, and laughing along with the woman who hadn't even been in our lives for 2 years, that cut deep. That night, I didn't sleep. My dog, Max, curled up at my feet, probably sensing something was wrong, but my mind kept replaying that phone call over and over. Every laugh, every word. No room for a man built like a truck. It wasn't about the chairs or the space. It was about me, who I was, what I looked like, what I represented. The next morning, I went through the motions: shower, coffee, work, but I felt hollow. At lunch, I drove out to the lake near my shop and just sat in my truck, staring at the water, trying to make sense of everything. Should I confront her? Should I let it slide? Part of me wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding, that maybe she was just joking along to keep the peace with her future in-laws. But that laugh, it wasn't nervous. It was easy, familiar. I didn't call her that day, or the next. I needed space to cool off. But the space just made the hurt sink in deeper. And then, as the week went on, I started getting texts from relatives about wedding plans, about where I'd be sitting, about hotel reservations. Each one was like salt in the wound. I kept imagining myself sitting there like some outsider, forced smile on my face, pretending everything was fine while her future in-laws whispered behind my back. And then, something in me shifted. If my presence was such a problem, maybe I'd give them exactly what they wanted, and see how they handled it when the one person who had quietly paid for half of this wedding wasn't there to foot the bill anymore. I didn't say anything out loud. Not yet. But I picked up my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and stared at 3 names for a long, long time. When I finally pressed call, my hands didn't shake. I didn't tell anyone about the phone call. Not my brother, not my crew at work, not even my best friend who I usually vent to when life gets messy. I just kept quiet and kept watching. There's a certain kind of silence that feels like it hums inside your chest, like the world is holding its breath with you. That was me for the next few weeks. Emily texted me the next morning about a florist meeting. She sent pictures of pastel roses, twinkly lights, little seating cards with everyone's names printed in delicate gold script. She even asked me for my favorite dessert so they could have it at the rehearsal dinner. I stared at that message for a long time, wondering if I was supposed to feel special, included, like maybe this was her way of balancing out what I'd heard. But when I looked closer at one of the photos she sent of the seating chart, my name was scribbled in pencil on the far corner table with +1 next to it, while Matt's entire family had their names inked in calligraphy near the head table. I didn't respond right away. When I finally did, it was a short, "looks nice." No emojis. No dad jokes. Just neutral. She didn't notice the difference, or she pretended not to. A few days later, she came by the shop unannounced. She hadn't done that in months, and for a split second, I felt relief. Maybe she wanted to talk things out. But the second she stepped in, I could tell she was on a mission. She had that overly bright tone she uses when she wants something. "Dad, I was thinking," she said, hopping up to sit on my workbench like she did when she was a teenager. "Would you mind covering the extra cost for the string quartet? Matt's mom thinks the DJ is a bit, I don't know, tacky." I kept my back to her, finishing up a piece of trim I'd been sanding. "How much extra?" I asked. "Only like $2,000. She said it so casually, like she was asking me to grab milk on my way home. "It would just make everything feel more elegant, you know?" I turned around and leaned against the bench. "Emily," I said slowly, "I already covered the venue, the catering deposit, and the photographer. You and Matt said you were taking care of the extras." She gave me this look, half pleading, half annoyed. "I know, Dad, but Matt's parents are paying for the bar upgrade, and I don't want them to think we're cheap." There it was again. Them. Her future in-laws. I didn't say no. I didn't say yes, either. I just told her I'd think about it, and she left looking slightly put out. That night, I didn't think about string quartets. I thought about the way she said them, and how I wasn't sure if I even belonged in the we she kept talking about anymore. The next weekend was the bridal shower. I wasn't invited, obviously, but my sister went and sent me pictures. Everyone was smiling, laughing, holding champagne flutes. There was one photo, Emily and her future mother-in-law arm in arm, grinning like lifelong best friends, and I swear I could hear that laugh from the phone call echoing in my head. The caption read, "My second mom," with a heart emoji. I put my phone face down and didn't look at it again for the rest of the day. But things really started to shift when my name came up in the family group chat. Matt's mom had apparently taken over organizing the rehearsal dinner and sent out a long message about formal attire required and limited seating. Someone, I think it was Matt's sister, replied, "What about Emily's dad?" Matt's mom wrote back, "Of course, but maybe he'd be more comfortable coming late, after dinner, for the toast." I stared at that message until the screen dimmed. Nobody in the group defended me. Not Emily. Not Matt. Not even my sister. Later that night, Emily called me. She sounded nervous this time, like she knew how bad that message looked. "Dad, don't take it personally," she said quickly. "Momby just thinks it'll be less stressful for everyone if the seating is simple. You know how she is. She's just really particular about photos and symmetry and me?" I asked. There was a long pause. "Dad," she said, but her voice was thin, cautious, like she was afraid I might actually push back for once. I didn't. Not yet. I just said, "Sure, whatever you think is best." But after that call, I sat in my dark kitchen for a long time, my coffee gone cold in my hands. Max laid his head on my knee, sensing the storm brewing inside me. This wasn't just about a wedding anymore. This was about respect, or the lack of it. I started noticing other things too. I wasn't invited to go suit shopping with Matt's dad and brothers. When they sent out a group text about the guys getting together for cigars the night before the wedding, my phone stayed silent. The rehearsal dinner menu got changed without anyone asking me if I had preferences or allergies. At first, I told myself I was overreacting, that I was just being sensitive because of what I'd overheard. But then one afternoon, I stopped by Emily's house to drop off a tool set she'd borrowed, and Matt's mom's car was in the driveway. I almost didn't go in, but I figured maybe this was my chance to make peace. When I walked in, the conversation in the kitchen stopped dead. Emily gave me a quick smile, the kind you give a stranger you weren't expecting, and Matt's mom didn't even bother to hide the way her eyes flicked over me, head to toe, like she was sizing me up. "Oh," she said flatly. "Didn't realize you'd be stopping by." "It's my daughter's house," I said evenly. Emily jumped in quickly, a little too quickly. "We were just talking about the ceremony setup, Dad. Momby thinks we should move the arch to the center so it photographs better." I nodded slowly. "Sounds like you two have it handled." Matt's mom pursed her lips, clearly done with the conversation. Well, she said, grabbing her purse, I should get going. We still have to finalize the family seating. She looked right at Emily when she said it, like I wasn't even standing there. When she left, the silence was thick. I turned to Emily. Do you even want me there? I asked quietly. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out at first. Of course I do, Dad, she finally said. You're my father. I need everyone to get along, okay? Please don't make this harder. Harder. That word stuck with me all the way home. I didn't yell. I didn't slam doors. But that night, I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the wedding folder. Invoices, contracts, receipts. My handwriting was on every check. My name on every payment. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel sad. I felt steady. Because if they wanted to pretend I didn't matter, I could show them exactly what that looked like. 2 weeks before the wedding, I was just starting to make peace with the idea that I'd be treated like some kind of background extra. Not happy about it, just resigned. I'd been quiet, calm, going through the motions, waiting to see how things would play out. Then came the Sunday dinner that snapped whatever thread was holding me back. Emily had invited me over for a final planning dinner with her and Matt. I figured this was my chance to at least feel included, maybe talk through some logistics, get the rundown of where I was supposed to be and when. I even stopped at the bakery and picked up her favorite cinnamon coffee cake, trying to remind myself that she was still my kid and I loved her, even if this whole wedding process had turned into a circus. When I walked in, the first thing I noticed was how polished everything looked. Candles on the table, fancy charcuterie board laid out, wine breathing in a decanter. And sitting at the table with Matt, and Emily was Matt's mom. Oh, Noah, she said with mock surprise, like I was a +1 who'd shown up uninvited. Didn't know you were coming tonight. Emily smiled nervously. I told you, Mom B. Dad was coming for dinner. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and for some reason, that made my stomach tighten. I put the cake down and took a seat. For a few minutes, things were polite. Small talk about the weather, work, the neighbor's dog that kept digging up their flower beds. Then Matt cleared his throat and pulled out a stack of papers. So, he said, glancing at Emily like they'd rehearsed this, we've been looking over the wedding expenses, and we wanted to go over a few things with you. I felt my jaw tighten but nodded. Sure, I said evenly. He started flipping through the stack, reading line items aloud like an accountant. Venue, catering, photography, florals. Then he slid one page across the table toward me. We were hoping you could cover these last few items, he said. It just makes more sense since you're, more financially stable. I looked down at the paper. It wasn't a small list. It was thousands of dollars in extras, upgraded chairs, a champagne fountain, a horse-drawn carriage for Emily's entrance. I let the silence hang for a moment, then looked up. You already asked me for money for the quartet, I said quietly. Now this. Matt shifted in his seat, but it was Matt's mom who jumped in before Emily could answer. It's really just about making sure Emily has the wedding she deserves, she said, her voice sickly sweet. And honestly, it's not that much when you consider what people will think if things look, well, cheap. Cheap. That word burned hotter than I expected. I turned to Emily. Is this what you wanted to talk about tonight? She hesitated, then nodded. Dad, I just want everything to be perfect. And Matt's parents have already done so much. I thought. You thought I'd just keep writing checks. I finished for her. The room went quiet. And then Matt's mom, God bless her for having no sense of timing, leaned forward and said, it's not just about money, no? We were also thinking about the processional. You walking Emily down the aisle might make things uneven. Visually, I mean. Matt's father is very tall, and I felt something in me snap. You don't want me to walk my own daughter down the aisle? My voice was calm, too calm. Emily looked horrified. No, Dad, that's not what she meant. Yes, it is, I said, still looking at Matt's mom. That's exactly what she meant. Matt's mom didn't even flinch. It's about the photos, she said simply. The symmetry matters. I pushed my chair back and stood up so fast it scraped the hardwood. Max, who'd been lying by the door, jumped to his feet, sensing the shift in the air. Emily reached out like she wanted me to sit back down. Dad, please. No, I said, my voice low but steady. You've made it pretty clear where I stand in all of this. Or rather, where I don't stand. Matt tried to smooth things over. Noah, come on, we're just trying to make this day special. For who? I asked sharply. Because from where I'm standing, It feels like I'm just the wallet you pull out when you need to upgrade the centerpieces." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't stop. "Not now. You know what hurts the most?" I said, looking right at her. "It's not that they don't like me. People don't have to like me. It's that you laughed. You heard them tear me down, and you laughed. And now you're sitting here asking me to pay for a carriage while you talk about replacing me in the one moment a father is supposed to have." The silence after that was deafening. I grabbed my jacket, called for Max, and walked out. Nobody followed me. When I got home, I didn't pour myself a drink or turn on the TV. I sat at my kitchen table, pulled out my phone, and opened the folder of wedding contracts again. And that was when I made the 3 calls that would change everything. The drive home that night was quiet except for Max's heavy breathing in the back seat and the occasional hum of tires over uneven asphalt. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't call anyone. I just let the silence fill the cab, thinking about every word I'd just heard at that dinner table. The farther I got from Emily's house, the heavier my chest felt, like someone had tied a weight to my ribs and let it drag me under. By the time I pulled into my driveway, it was dark. My porch light flicked on automatically, casting a pale glow over the front steps, but I didn't get out right away. I just sat there gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. I could still see Emily's face in my mind, the way her lips trembled when I called her out, the quick flicker of guilt before she looked away. I'd seen that look before, when she was 5 and tried to hide the broken vase behind the couch. Back then, I'd knelt down, taken her tiny hands in mine, and told her she could always tell me the truth, that I'd always be there. And now? Now she was hiding something bigger, not a broken vase, but a broken bond. And she wasn't 5 anymore. She was a grown woman making choices, and those choices didn't include me. I eventually went inside, let Max out back, and sat at the kitchen table with the folder of wedding contracts spread out like a crime scene file. Every receipt, every payment, every agreement had my name on it, my pen strokes, my signature, my hard-earned money behind it. I thought about how many late nights I'd worked, how many weekends I'd skipped fishing trips to finish jobs. Also, she could have a day that now apparently didn't even have room for me. I barely slept that night. When I did, my dreams were strange, jumbled things. Flashes of Emily in a white dress walking down the aisle with Matt's father, my chair at the reception empty, people whispering and glancing at me like I didn't belong there. I woke up sweating, staring at the ceiling, Max's head resting on my arm like he knew I was unraveling. The next morning, I went through the motions at work, but my guys noticed something was off. I'm not usually the type to snap at people, but when one of the apprentices dropped a hammer and dented a cabinet, I barked at him so sharply the whole shop went silent. I apologized immediately, but the damage was done. They kept their distance the rest of the day, glancing at me like I was a ticking time bomb. When lunch rolled around, I didn't go out with the crew like I usually do. Instead, I drove to the lake again, parked in the same spot as before, and stared at the water until the world blurred around the edges. I wasn't angry anymore. Not exactly. Just hollow. For a few days, that's how it went. Work, home, sleep, or at least trying to. Emily texted me a few times, light little messages about caterer tastings and hair trials, as if nothing had happened. I didn't reply right away, and when I finally did, my responses were short, clipped. I could tell she noticed because her texts started coming less and less often. Then one night, about a week later, my sister called. She never calls unless something is wrong. "You okay?" she asked cautiously. "Yeah," I lied. "You don't sound okay." I hesitated. "Just tired." There was a pause. Then she said softly, "Emily told me about dinner. She said you left upset." "Upset?" I repeated flatly, staring at the ceiling. "She's worried you won't come to the wedding." I let out a humorless laugh. "Is she?" "Noah, I'm not having this conversation right now," I said, maybe sharper than I meant to. "Good night." I hung up before she could respond. After that, I started avoiding everyone. No Sunday dinners. No group chats. No answering the phone unless it was about work. I threw myself into my business, taking every extra job I could, staying late at the shop, coming home so tired I barely had the energy to make a sandwich before bed. But the thing about avoidance is that it doesn't actually fix anything. It just gives the problem room to grow. One night, I was in my office going over invoices when Max patted in and dropped a tennis ball at my feet. He hadn't done that in weeks. I stared at it for a long time before I picked it up and followed him outside. We played fetch until the stars came out. until my shoulders loosened for the first time in days. And standing there in the quiet night air, watching Max chase the ball with everything he had, something shifted. I realized I didn't want to feel like this anymore. Powerless. Invisible. That's when I started thinking about those 3 calls I'd made the night of the dinner. At first, it had been pure impulse, a way to feel like I had some control, even if it was just symbolic. But the more I thought about it, the more it started to feel less like impulse and more like strategy. I began reviewing the contracts line by line, highlighting clauses, making notes. I called the venue under the pretense of confirming guest counts and asked a few careful questions about refund policies. I checked the payment schedule for the caterer, noticed the final payment was due just 3 days before the wedding. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't even sure yet what I was going to do. But for the first time since that phone call in my shop, I felt steady, like the ground under me wasn't shifting anymore. A few days later, Emily sent out an updated seating chart in the group chat. My name was still penciled in at the far table, and this time there was no +1 next to it. Just my name. Alone. I stared at that chart for a long time, and then I smiled. Not the kind of smile you give when something's funny, but the kind you give when a puzzle piece finally clicks into place. Because I finally knew exactly what I was going to do. Once I knew what I was going to do, the heaviness I'd been carrying around for weeks started to lift. It wasn't gone completely. There was still hurt, still disappointment, but it was different now. Controlled. Focused. Like I'd finally put all the scattered pieces of this situation into some kind of order. And, strangely enough, once that mental shift happened, the rest of my life started falling into place too. At the shop, my guys noticed it first. I wasn't snapping anymore. I wasn't distracted, staring off into space like a man replaying the same argument in his head. Instead, I was back to cracking jokes, jumping in to help finish projects, even buying lunch for everyone one Friday, just because. We landed a big remodeling job with a client I'd been chasing for months, and I threw myself into it, spending hours at the site making sure everything was perfect. It felt good, better than good, to be building something I had full control over, something that wouldn't suddenly turn on me or push me out. In the evenings, I started taking Max for long walks again. We'd go past the lake, down old dirt roads where the air smelled like pine and wet earth. I'd use those walks to think, to plan, to rehearse conversations I might need to have. By the time we got home, I'd usually have a new idea or step to add to the growing plan in my head. I made a list, not just of the vendors and contracts, but of everything I'd done for Emily leading up to this wedding. The house down payment, the car, the tuition payments, the savings bonds I'd given her every birthday since she was 5. I wasn't planning to throw it in her face. This wasn't about guilt-tripping her. This was about reminding myself of the role I'd played, the support I'd given. I needed to see it all laid out so I wouldn't forget that I wasn't some peripheral figure. I had been there every step of the way, and I wasn't going to be erased that easily. Then I started making calls. Calm, friendly, professional calls. First was the venue. The woman who managed it knew me by name at this point. I told her I was confirming some details, asked about the refund schedule, just in case there were last-minute changes. She told me I was still the primary contact on the account. Not Emily, not Matt, which meant every major decision ran through me. I thanked her, asked her to email me copies of the signed agreements, and hung up feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. Next was the caterer. Same story. I was the primary payer, which meant final decisions, including menu changes, needed my approval. The photographer, the florist, the rental company, all the same. My name was on every contract. I didn't cancel anything. Not yet. But I made sure every single vendor knew that any changes needed to be run past me directly. That way, if Matt's mom decided to swap out half the decor again or add more upgrades, they wouldn't go behind my back. It wasn't just about money, though. I also started rebuilding my relationships, carefully. I called my sister and asked her to come by for dinner. We grilled steaks in the backyard, drank a couple of beers, and for the first time in weeks, I told her the whole story. The overheard phone call. The seating chart. The dinner where Matt's mom tried to edge me out of walking my own daughter down the aisle. My sister listened without interrupting, just nodding slowly, her face darkening. When I finished, she sat back and said, "Okay, yeah, I get it now. It's not about the money," I said quietly. "I know." She laughed, when her future mother-in-law said I shouldn't come. She laughed. That was when my sister put her hand over mine and said, Then it's time you stop making this easy for them. I nodded. That's the plan. After that conversation, I felt lighter. Not happy exactly, but resolved. My sister promised to keep what I told her to herself, and I believed her. She'd always been good at keeping my confidence. Over the next few days, I started showing up a little less like the man who'd been beaten down and a little more like the father who'd built his own business from nothing. When Emily called, I answered, but I kept my tone calm, measured. If she asked me about something wedding-related, I told her I'd take care of it, no hesitation. She seemed relieved, maybe even thought I was finally coming around. But I wasn't coming around. I was getting ready. I scheduled a quiet meeting with the venue manager. No one knew about it but me. We went over the contracts line by line, and I asked questions that made her raise an eyebrow. Refund deadlines, transfer policies, what would happen if a major payer pulled out just before the event? She didn't pry, probably thought I was just being thorough, but by the time I left, I had everything I needed in writing. I did the same with the caterer and the rental company. Every one of them assured me that as long as I acted before a certain date, I could make whatever adjustments I wanted, including reducing the headcount or canceling outright. Meanwhile, Emily kept sending little updates, dress fittings, hair trial photos, the cake topper she'd picked out. I told her they looked great, kept my responses short but polite. I think she mistook my calm for forgiveness. And maybe part of me wanted her to. Because when the time came, I didn't want anyone to say I'd been rash or vindictive. I wanted it to be clear that I'd given them every chance to make this right, that they had every opportunity to treat me with even a shred of respect. 1 week before the wedding, Matt's mom posted a message in the family group chat about the rehearsal dinner. Formal attire, no jeans, no exceptions, she wrote. Then, as if she couldn't help herself, she added, "Let's keep this classy." For the first time in weeks, I laughed. A real, genuine laugh. Because by then, my plan was already in motion. Once I decided this wasn't just about hurt feelings, but about setting a boundary they couldn't ignore, everything clicked into place. This wasn't revenge out of spite. It was a correction, a course adjustment, a way to remind everyone, including Emily, of who I was and what I'd done for her. The first thing I did was double-check every contract one last time. I spread them all out on my dining table late one night. Venue, catering, rentals, photographer, and took a red pen to them like I was grading a test. Every line that put me in control got a star. Every deadline, a circle. When I finished, I realized something that made me sit back and grin. I held all the cards. Literally. Emily and Matt had been treating me like a guest in their big production, but legally, on paper, I was still the one pulling the strings. If I said the caterer wasn't serving lobster rolls, they weren't. If I said the rental company wasn't delivering gold Chiavari chairs, they weren't. If I said the wedding wasn't happening at that venue on that date, well, it wasn't. I didn't intend to ruin her wedding, not at first. But I wanted her to understand that you can't erase someone from your life and still expect them to bankroll it. The next step was timing. I knew I couldn't wait too long or it would be too late to make changes. But I also couldn't do it too early. It needed to be close enough to the wedding that the impact would actually be felt. Too much notice and Matt's mom might have time to swoop in and save the day. I settled on 3 days before the wedding. Enough time to act decisively, but not enough time for them to completely rearrange everything without massive stress and expense. With the date in mind, I got to work shoring up my position. I visited the venue manager again, this time in person. I asked to see the event calendar for that weekend. Not just Emily's wedding, but all the bookings. There were 2 other weddings scheduled on the same day, meaning if ours canceled, there was a good chance someone else would grab the spot instantly. The manager confirmed that if we canceled, the venue wouldn't hold the slot. It would go to whoever paid first. "Would you like me to put a soft hold on another date, just in case?" she asked casually. "Yes," I said, surprising even myself with how steady my voice was. "Go ahead and do that. Something small, maybe late summer." She typed a few things into the computer, then smiled. "All set. No deposit yet. Just let us know if you'd like to convert it." As I left the venue, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This wasn't chaos anymore. It was order. Next was the caterer. I called the owner directly, a guy named Frank I'd worked with on company events before, and asked what would happen if we cut the guest list by half. He told me it was possible, though we'd lose part of the deposit. "Does that include the upgraded menu Matt requested?" I asked. "Yes," Frank said. but we can downgrade it to your original package, no problem. Good to know, I said. Then, casually, I asked if they had any big events that same weekend they might be able to prioritize if ours fell through. As a matter of fact, Frank said, we've got a corporate retreat on standby looking for a full-service caterer that Saturday. If you guys don't go through with it, we'd take them instead. Perfect, I said, making a mental note. By this point, I was starting to enjoy myself, not in a malicious way, but in the way you enjoy finally taking control of something that's been spinning out for too long. Then came the financial part. I went to my bank, sat down with my advisor, and asked about temporarily freezing transfers from my personal account to Emily's joint account. He raised an eyebrow but said yes, as long as there was no automatic withdrawal attached. I made sure there wasn't. Then I asked him to print out a detailed statement showing every payment I'd made toward the wedding so far, every deposit, every check. I wanted it all in one neat, organized packet. He handed me a folder by the end of the meeting, and I slid it into my truck's glove compartment like it was a secret weapon. 2 nights before the wedding, I got an unexpected call from Matt's dad. Noah, he said, his voice overly cheerful. Just wanted to check in and make sure you've got the suit sorted for Saturday. Don't want any last-minute hiccups. Suit's fine, I said evenly. Good, he said. And listen, I know there was some tension, but I think we're all on the same page now. It's going to be a beautiful day. Sure, I said, my tone giving nothing away. He hesitated, then chuckled awkwardly. I know my wife can be a bit particular, but she means well. She just wants what's best for Matt. For Matt, I repeated. Right, he said quickly. Anyway, see you Saturday. When I hung up, I just sat there in my truck for a minute, staring at the dashboard. For Matt. That was the whole problem, wasn't it? Everything was for Matt's family, for the picture-perfect in-law dynamic they wanted. Nobody had asked what was best for Emily's father. And by then, it didn't matter. Because I was ready. I had the contracts. I had the financials. I had the timing. And when the morning of my chosen day rolled around, I woke up before sunrise, brewed a strong cup of coffee, and sat at my kitchen table with Max at my feet. I looked at the folder of documents, at the list I'd made, and felt something I hadn't felt in months: peace. It was time to make the first move. The morning of my chosen day dawned bright and cool, the kind of morning that almost feels like it's daring you to make something of it. I drank my coffee slowly, letting the quiet of the house settle around me. Max paced near the door like he could sense something was coming, some big shift, and maybe he was right. By 8 a.m., I had everything laid out on the kitchen table: contracts, bank statements, my handwritten notes. It almost looked like I was about to teach a class on Wedding Planning 101. I double-checked my watch, took a deep breath, and made the first call. The venue manager answered on the second ring. This is Noah, I said evenly. I need to make some changes to our event on Saturday. She paused. Of course, what kind of changes? I explained that I would be reducing the headcount by a significant margin, nearly half. When she asked if I was sure, I calmly confirmed. Then I asked her to move the final payment deadline forward to that very day and copy me on the updated invoice. Are you expecting someone else to handle payment? She asked delicately. Yes, I said simply. But if it's not handled today, cancel the event and release the date to the next party in line. There was another pause. Then she said, Understood. We'll send the updated documents within the hour. When I hung up, I didn't feel guilt. I felt clarity. Next was the caterer. I called Frank directly and told him the same thing. Guest list cut in half. Menu reverted to the original package. He hesitated, probably calculating how much food he wouldn't have to buy, then cheerfully agreed. That'll free up my Saturday evening a bit, he said. You want me to hold the extra staff in case you change your mind? No need, I said. I doubt we'll need more than what's already booked. I could practically hear him shrug before he promised to send me the adjusted bill. Then came the photographer. I told her we'd be reducing her hours of coverage to just the ceremony and a handful of portraits. She sounded surprised but not upset. Less work for her, after all. By the time I was done, I'd effectively stripped the wedding back down to the bones. It was still happening, technically, but it wasn't the overblown spectacle Matt's mom had been orchestrating for months. The lavish dinner? Gone. The extended reception with hours of dancing? Trimmed down. The fancy upgrades? Canceled. And most importantly, every vendor now had a paper trail showing that I was the decision maker, and that payment would need to come through me or be canceled altogether. I could have stopped there. I'd already sent a pretty clear message. But then my phone buzzed. It was a group chat message from Matt's mom. Reminder to everyone. Formal attire required for rehearsal tonight. Please be on time. We're starting promptly at 6. Not a word to me directly. No acknowledgement. No olive branch. I stared at that message for a long moment, then opened a new one, just for Emily. Need to talk. Come by the shop. She replied almost instantly. Everything okay? Just come by, I wrote back. An hour later, she pulled into the lot, looking a little nervous. She stepped into the shop, her hair pulled back, wearing one of Matt's sweatshirts. For a moment, she looked like my kid again, the one who used to sit on that very workbench swinging her legs while I taught her how to sand a piece of pine. Dad, she said cautiously. I gestured toward the office. Sit. When she sat down, I slid the folder of documents across the desk. That's everything I've paid for so far, I said. She opened the folder, her eyes scanning the statements, then flicking up to me. Dad, what is this? That, I said evenly, is the wedding as it exists because of me. Every deposit, every signature, every contract with my name on it. And this morning, I made some changes. Her eyebrows knitted. What do you mean, changes? I cut the guest list, canceled the upgrades, reduced the catering order, and I told the venue that if the final payment isn't handled today, the date gets released to someone else. She went pale. You can't just. Yes, I said calmly. I can. And I did. For a moment, she just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find words. Why would you do this? She finally asked, her voice breaking. I leaned back in my chair. Because somewhere along the way, Emily, you decided I was good enough to pay for this wedding, but not good enough to actually be part of it. You let them talk about me like I was some embarrassment, and you laughed. You sat there while they tried to take away the one thing I was supposed to do, walk you down the aisle, and you said nothing. You let them turn me into a bystander at my own daughter's wedding. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't mean. Yes, you did, I said gently but firmly. And now, you get to decide what happens next. If you want this wedding to go on the way you planned, you and Matt will have to step up and handle it from here. Pay the balances. Re-add the extras if you want them. Or you can leave it as is and have something smaller. Simpler. Something you actually control. She sat there in stunned silence, staring at the folder. I'm not doing this to punish you, I said after a moment. I'm doing this because I will not let anyone treat me like a checkbook with legs. I love you, Emily. I always will. But I won't be invisible at your wedding. She nodded slowly, blinking back tears. I need to talk to Matt, she whispered. Do that, I said, standing up. She took the folder with her when she left, clutching it like a lifeline. That night, I didn't go to the rehearsal dinner. I didn't even check my phone. Instead, I sat on the back porch with Max, watching the sun go down, feeling something I hadn't felt in months, calm. Because no matter what happened next, I'd taken back my place in this story. The morning of the wedding came with a quiet I wasn't expecting. No frantic texts. No last-minute calls begging me to rush over. Just the sound of my coffee maker bubbling and Max thumping his tail against the kitchen floor like it was any other Saturday. I didn't put on my suit right away. I sat at the table in jeans and a flannel, staring at my phone, wondering if Emily would call. Part of me hoped she would. Part of me hoped she wouldn't, because if she didn't, that meant my message had landed. Around 9, there was a single text. From Emily. Ceremony at 2. Would like you to be there. Please. No emojis. No extra words. Just that. I looked at it for a long moment, then set the phone down and went to shower. When I arrived at the venue, I was the last one there. The parking lot was only half full, which immediately told me something had changed, dramatically. When I walked inside, it was like stepping into a completely different event. The over-the-top floral arches were gone, replaced with simple arrangements of greenery. The gold chairs had been swapped for plain white ones. The guest tables were fewer, closer together, and instead of towering centerpieces, there were small candles flickering in glass jars. It wasn't fancy, but it was beautiful, intimate, even. Emily was waiting for me near the back of the room. She was already in her dress, her hair pinned up, looking like the kid I used to walk to the school bus stop, only all grown up. Dad, she said, her voice small. I just stood there, taking her in. You did all this? I asked. She nodded. After we talked, I called everyone and told them we were scaling back. Matt was furious at first, but He came around. We paid the balances ourselves. Mombi tried to argue, but I told her this was my wedding, not hers. I raised an eyebrow, and she took that well. A faint smile touched Emily's lips. She said if she wasn't going to get the wedding she wanted, she wasn't coming. So, she gestured toward the mostly empty front row where Matt's dad sat looking uncomfortable and very much alone. Wow, I said softly. She made her choice, Emily said, her voice stronger now. But so did I. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then she stepped closer, her eyes shining. Will you still walk me down the aisle? I felt my throat tighten, but I nodded. Yeah, kiddo, I will. When the ceremony started, it was nothing like the extravagant event Matt's mom had been planning. There were maybe 50 people instead of 150. The music was simple, just a single violinist instead of a quartet. But when Emily took my arm and we started down the aisle, I realized it didn't matter. Everyone was watching. Not in the judgmental, whisper behind their hands way I'd been dreading. Just watching. Respectfully. Like we belonged there. At the altar, Matt looked nervous but grateful. He reached out and shook my hand before I placed Emily's hand in his, something that might have been small to everyone else, but meant the world to me. The ceremony itself was short and heartfelt. No long speeches, no theatrics. When it was over, we all moved to the reception area, where the scaled-back dinner felt more like a family gathering than a spectacle. People actually talked to each other instead of just taking photos for Instagram. At one point during the meal, Matt's dad came over and cleared his throat. Noah, he said stiffly, I owe you an apology. We should have handled things differently. I looked him in the eye for a long moment, then nodded. Yes, you should have. He seemed like he wanted to say more, but then just nodded and walked away. That was fine with me. Later that night, as the music played softly and people started dancing, Emily came over and sat beside me. I know I hurt you, she said quietly. I can't take that back. But I want you to know, I chose this. Not because you forced me to, but because I realized I'd been letting other people decide what mattered to me. And I don't want that anymore. I put my hand over hers. Good, I said. Because today, this was you. Not them. And it was perfect. She smiled then, a real smile, the kind that crinkled her nose like when she was a little girl. Thanks, Dad. We sat there for a while, just listening to the music. At one point, Matt's dad got up to dance with his wife. Oh wait, no, she wasn't there. He just sat awkwardly nursing his drink while people whispered, and I'll admit, there was a part of me that enjoyed watching him squirm. Actions have consequences. But the best moment came right at the end of the night. As everyone was packing up, Emily came over with the bouquet in her hand and held it out to me. I want you to have this, she said softly. I looked at it for a long moment before taking it. I'll keep it, I said, my voice catching just a little. To remember today by. When I left the venue, I didn't feel like the man who had been sidelined and humiliated weeks earlier. I felt like a father again, like someone who had reclaimed his place without raising his voice or slamming a single door. As I loaded Max into the truck and started the engine, I glanced back at the venue one last time. The lights were glowing warm against the dark sky, laughter spilling faintly into the night. And for the first time in months, I drove home with a smile that wasn't forced. Because I hadn't just gotten my seat at the table back. I'd made sure it was one they'd never try to take away again.